The DFS studio is brought to you by DraftKings. Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome in. It's Tuesday, December 19th, Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined, as always, by Matthew. You got Drew locked bets.
That's what it feels like, man. It feels like Parks and Rec style. You got jammed. Drew locked, dude. What the heck? I mean, what are we doing? A little peek behind the curtain. Yeah, I got a haircut yesterday. I was very productive day. At work, and by at work I mean in my office, and I'm riding high. We're going into Monday night. Got the lead in the fourth quarter. Things are great. People in the DFS pass crushed this weekend. Vibes are high, and then Drew lock. Are you kidding me? I mean, now the Eagles are reeling. I don't know what to think. But I just want to take a quick second and say, if you haven't watched the interview with Drew Lock last night with Lisa Salters, watch it. I was obviously upset as a fan, but man, it's hard not to feel so excited for the human being Drew Lock after what he went through, getting benched and traded, and people make fun of him and whatever. And then he comes out and he kind of shows his humility. So did want to shout out Drew Lock. I was very happy for him, the person. But what are the Eagles doing, man?
Yeah, it's a tailspin right now. But Betz and I were talking a little before the show, but these are the kind of things in the NFL that can reverse very quickly. They play the Giants twice, Cardinals to end the season. Let's say they get the 2 seed. They're on the other side of the bracket from the 49ers. They hire somebody to take out Brock Purdy. Those are the things that Philly people can hope in, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and by take out, just bum his knee. Come on, people. Get your head out of the gutter. It's Christmas season. We are glad you're with us. We are going to be talking through the Week 16, just previewing the main slate and talking about Christmas football, because that's what this week really is about. And you're going to hear this on the main show. You're going to hear it today from me. You're going to hear it all week and on Friday's podcast. ChristmasFootball.com is the only website you need, the only thing you need in your life. Don't say Christmas football, say ChristmasFootball.com, because our company has a sick obsession of buying domain names that redirect to our site. So every year I forget that we have it, but it is still there, ChristmasFootball.com. We get 3 games on Christmas. The main slate is on Christmas Eve, so I don't know your plans, what you're doing with your family. It's going to be tough to juggle. I feel like this week is not normal because everybody just has so many other things going on. So do we have an edge this week, Betz?
I think if you're willing to abandon your family and focus on the slate, you'll have an edge. That's what it's all about. We joked on, what was it, the Thanksgiving slate? Hey, Grandma, that's Turd Ferguson. We need him to catch a touchdown. Get ready to say those sort of things on the main slate when you're by your family. Get them involved. You can sweat it out together. But yeah, man, absolutely crazy this week because we got Thursday, of course. We got the showdown slate. There's a 2-game slate on Saturday. And then, of course, a 9-game main slate. And then we have 3 games on Christmas. So all football, all the time.
Yeah, and I think there's a plethora of emotions that people are feeling from their home leagues. If you made it through to the next round, you're in the semifinals, to your own family stuff you have going on, your own Christmas wishes of what you hope you're going to get. I know Betz and I on Dynasty Podcast are talking about our Dynasty Christmas wishes. We'll be talking about our favorite Christmas presents we've ever gotten. But then you're also juggling hey, on Christmas Eve, are you sweating out the Cardinals and Bears game and the Cowboys and Dolphins game? And then there's just so many games and so many different slates that it's really hard to contextualize all of them. But in the DFS Pass, if you want our rankings, if you want our picks, if you want Betz to talk out everything that is the Saints and Rams for Thursday night, you can get that DFSpass.com. The pricing is too low. I wish I could say, hey, we have a Christmas sale, but we've been having a sale right now for a while. So weeks 16, 17, 18, and all through the playoffs, Puff DFS is, I would say, one of the better treats. You can get that at dfspass.com and use the promo code DFSPod. So why don't you just treat yourself with a little holiday
Treat yourself.
stocking giveaway. Yeah, treat yourself. And DFS Pass if you want to be a part of that. But let's review this past week.
Straight cash, homie.
So I need to confess that I was absent in the DFS slate. And I feel totally fine being transparent about that on this podcast. So I flew out to Arizona, my wife and I on Thursday, company Christmas party, played a lot of pickleball, had some great times with everybody, had a little fire pit hangout, went out to dinner a couple times. I mean, we were just jam-packed. And so I made my original cash lineup, and then I was flying back on Sunday, and I was texting Bex, and I go, Betz, I haven't looked at a thing in the last 3 days other than like I put my best plays out based on projections, but I wasn't able to like put together full lineups. So I kind of abstained from this slate, and I'm kind of thankful because it seemed kind of hard.
It was, dude, and you picked a good morning to not play if you were flying across the country because, my goodness, the news on Sunday morning was coming through hot and heavy. It was, I think, an interesting week in cash because it was very clear, I think, what to do from a starting standpoint. I mean, Stafford was, I think, everyone's favorite play and for obvious reasons. And then it was, okay, well, you play Kyron and you play CMC because those guys are the best running back plays on the slate. Then we get Brian Robinson out. So you have a choice of, do you go 3 running back? And if you do, who do you want to play, Gibson or Zeke? I landed on Zeke. He was fine. I thought he was a great fade in tournaments. We talked a little bit about that on the show. And then we had a bunch of cheap options open up at wide receiver to kind of help make all of this work with, Chris Olave getting rolled out. We had Rashid Shaheed come in. The Patriots were a little thin without Juju. So Pop Douglas was a guy people played. So it was kind of a pretty obvious slate, in my opinion, as far as how to play it. But all in all, I thought it was a really good week for the best plays and for people in the DFS pass, especially for cash. We had a lot of people playing Jaden Reed for obvious reasons. And then Rashee Rice was another great play this week. The dude just keeps getting it done, man. I think he had over 90% route rate this past week, was his highest of the year. So that was great to see.
Yeah, one of my favorite things that I did get to do this past week is I got to write the Tournament Takes article, which is really all about game theory. Like, you can look at a slate, look at roster percentages, look at projections, and then be able to figure out like what are the points on the slate that you can create leverage on the rest of the field. And so I gave my picks in that article. I usually give them out in Discord, but Betz, I didn't even realize this. So look back, my running back pivots and leverage points that I gave to our people in the DFS pass: Raheem Mostert scored 2 touchdowns. James Cook scored 2 touchdowns. Jerick McKinnon scored 2 touchdowns. Those are the only 3 running backs I mentioned in that article to use. And James Cook has kind of been our boy the last 2 weeks, is saying, hey, in tournaments, people still are not playing him. And they're not playing him only because of matchup alone. Like, I don't want to play him against the Cowboys. But that was one of the things that we talked about. We talked about when we previewed the game. And then the wide receiver I talked about was play Debo, because despite his price and despite how hot he's been, like, his roster percentage still remained low. So we had some really big wins. And I think reading the slate is something that over time is a skill and a thing you get to work out. Like, okay, what are people doing? What are people overconfident in? And how can we move forward? And then Trey McBride was that last point that, I don't know, we just kind of hammered home. He's a wide receiver that was priced at 5,200. And we had some people that just went bonkers. Here's a great story. Speaking of money, and Betz, you can give some thoughts too. This person wrote in, I got a win story for the DFS guys. $5 for the 20K and the flea flicker on DK. I made a last-minute pivot to treat Trey McBride as a receiver and put him in the flex. That was direct commentary from the DFS pod. Keep up the good work and stay shady. And then Finn's Win 55 got 18th in the Millie Maker. They said, it's not a million, but it's the best I've done. I mean, 18th in the Millie Maker is like getting first in like a small field. I mean, it is like really, really hard to do, right?
I mean, that's better than first in a small field, honestly. 213 is the score. That's insane. So yeah, congrats to you guys. That was really fun to see. And then I also want to shout out our boy Matt Hakeem, who has been writing the Tournament Takes article all year. Been really fun. I think a lot of people in Discord have liked that article. It was new this year, and we decided to bring Matt on board. He competed in the DK Live final out in Arizona, actually, in Scottsdale, this past weekend with some of the best DFS players in the world. And he took 40th, which was awesome. So he had a nice little payday. So shout out to Matt and everyone in the DFS Pass. Really, really good slate, I thought, to pick up some momentum here into the end of the year.
Yeah. All right, let's move on.
State of the main slate.
Each week, we refer to the lines at DraftKings Sportsbook. That's where Betz and I play. You can go to sportsbook.draftkings.com. And let's check in with a few wagers. You got some divisional ones that you wanted to highlight.
Yes, these are not going well, Kyle. The vibes are bad. For a while, it looked pretty good, especially when we got the news that maybe CJ Stroud was going to miss at least a game. It's like, okay, yeah, the Jags for the AFC South looks pretty strong. Not so fast, my friend, especially with the Colts now emerging. They're all three of those teams tied at the top. So I have a ticket for the Jags to win the South. That's not looking as strong as it was earlier in the year. The Eagles for the NFC East look shaky right now because, I mean, if they falter down the stretch and the Cowboys win a couple of games, it is going to be the Cowboys there. So those two, at one point, we were cashing them already, and now it's time to question that.
One of the things we also talked about, I believe it was last week, is that some of the markets for awards are not as firm as people think when you get to weeks 14 and 15. It's like, okay, we kind of know Tyreek, is the favorite. He's probably going to win Offensive Player of the Year. Or MVP, Dak's on a roll. It's just how it's going to be. Whenever the field is overconfident in awards, we forget to realize that this is a narrative award, and the last 2 to 3 weeks really do seal the deal. So right now, it's moved in a direction where CMC and Brock Purdy are the favorites because of what they've done. Dallas lost. Tyreek was hurt. Things can change in any week. So is there any value? I want to check in one more time because I'm probably done with this. I had a little Purdy, a little CMC when they were still at plus odds, and I feel really good. But any final thoughts on Offensive Player of the Year or any awards markets?
I don't think there's much value at Offensive Player of the Year at this point. It is going to be either CMC or Tyreek, in my opinion, and Tyreek's plus 105, so it's basically even money. There's not really a ton of value there. And then for MVP, Purdy right now, I'm seeing anywhere from minus 175 to minus 200, depending on which book you look at. If you think Purdy runs away with this thing, in 2 or 3 weeks, that will look like a value. So I hate laying juice with this kind of stuff when it's not certain.
Yes.
Because on Monday night, on Christmas, I think it's actually Christmas night, the Ravens and 49ers play. If the Ravens win that game, Lamar will have a strong case for MVP. I'm not saying he should or shouldn't win. That's just going to be how it's perceived. And so if you think that that's going to be the case, I think the Niners are favored by like 5.5 though. So we'll see. But if you think that is the case, then placing a wager right now on Lamar makes sense to me. Otherwise, like you said, I'm kind of out. I have a little Purdy, I think 18 to 1 or something. Obviously, I am fully committed to Dak. Then it's kind of it at this point.
Yeah, and I think the key point I'm also hearing you say is you don't double down on what you think should happen because there's just still a lot of variance. Like you said, those are the two best teams in football playing on Christmas evening that everyone's going to be watching, where honestly in a neutral field, I'd put it at San Francisco minus 2.5 or something. Like it's a close game. So, man, that should be fun. I know a lot of fantasy matchups are right there, but awards markets is something that over time you place your long shots, you sprinkle a little bit here and there, something we talk about during the off season. So we get to do a lot of studies that just show like, hey, here's over time the best long shots, and wide receiver is usually one of the best for Offensive Player of the Year. We got it right with Justin Jefferson last year. CeeDee Lamb had a good little run, but it's going to be tough. He has scored a touchdown in 8 of his last 8 games.
Well, it doesn't matter when Christian McCaffrey scores 3 a game. Guy's unreal.
I know. Let's talk about the games for this slate. It's only a 9-game main slate because obviously we got no buys, but Thursday night, 2 on Saturday, Sunday night game, and 3 on Christmas evening, or Christmas Day, Christmas evening. So with a 9-game slate, there are a lot of names that aren't on it. That was like the way that I started this process, is just looking like, okay, which teams are not here? So for instance, off the main slate this week at quarterback, Josh Allen, Lamar, Mahomes, Hurts, Purdy. Running back is dead. I don't know how far you looked into like values, but I'm like CMC's gone, Kyron, James Cook, who's apparently like the best running back in football right now. Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, they're gone. At wide receiver, Eagles, Rams, 49ers, gone. And then tight ends, Kelsey, Kittle, and Likely. So our player pool has shrunk. Any initial feelings about a 9-game slate?
Yeah, I think you kind of laid it out perfectly. Is like, listen to the names that are not on the list. And it's like, well, who the heck are we going to play, right? Because we've been playing, the same cash quarterback for a while and kind of jamming CMC and figuring it out. And so I think because of that, we probably will see a slightly lower scoring slate overall, given the teams that are not on the main slate. But also when I look at the running backs compared to the wide receivers, I mean, there's some awesome wide receiver plays on the slate, in my opinion. And at running back, like, I know you're going to give some love to Rachaad White here in a little while. He's the RB1. And like, not that Rachaad White's had a bad year. He's actually been incredible for fantasy, but it's like, that is the state of the running back position currently. So I find it likely this week that I'll be trying to play a 3 wide receiver team, most likely, depending on what happens with news and injuries and stuff. But that's kind of my first take, is that the wide receivers look way stronger than the running backs do.
Yeah, and some people ask, like, why do you guys only focus on the main slate? It's just that these are the biggest contests. So it's able, we're just able to touch and look at and give advice for the widest range. Some people play the full slate, and that is fine. It just takes a lot to adjust, and the contest sizes aren't the exact same. When we look at the big contests that everybody plays, the Millie Maker, the Red Zone, the Play Action, all those on DraftKings are for the main slate. So that's why we're focusing on that on this podcast. But once again, in the DFS Pass, we have rankings, the optimizer. You can do it for all of those. The Dallas-Miami game right now is sitting at 51.5. And based on that total bets, what should we tell the people to do with their hard-earned money?
Well, let me pull up the model real quick and just crunch some numbers. We got to go under. I mean, you put it in our Slack yesterday. Like, there's been one game this year, or two maybe, that have gone over the 50-point total. So
One.
I mean, at this point, I'm just going to blindly bet it and just, ride the train while it's going, so to speak.
I don't know if this is like my idiot savant nature that I stumbled and bumbled, but the last 2 years, I've kind of been tracking this, and I've just blindly been saying it every offseason, like, guys, let's just bet the under. The year before was like 60%. It's like, wow, that's a really high number. It probably corrects itself this next year. And this year, it's 10 out of 11 games have hit the under. And we're focusing on closing line. Does it hit the under? So, obviously, this game can. We're not picking it apart. But the trends this year, NFL overall, have been gross games, different than you and I have ever seen. Like, you and I have been previewing games for 5 or 6 years together. And when we get our totals for these main slates, we're like, God, why are there so many games that are 38, 42? It's like, this is very different than what we used to do. Patrick Mahomes games, this week, they're 10-point home favorites, but the total's at 41.5. I mean, Patrick Mahomes games used to like average 51.5, 52. MVP season, it was like you were getting 54-point games on the reg, and now they're just gross. So I'm not saying bet the under, but all offseason and during the season, I've been saying if you want to blindly bet the under and just root for bad football, it's kind of been working out. Give me the teams with the highest team implied totals.
Yes, on the top of the slate this week, it is the Dolphins at 26.5. And then we kind of have a logjam here of just really good teams with really good team totals. The Lions and the Cowboys both at 25 points. And then quietly the Bears, 24.3, which I was excited to see. And then Indy at 23.3. So not as much of a, kind of separation, so to speak, at the top. Usually it's like, okay, Niners, maybe Dolphins, and then everyone else. This week, everyone's packed in pretty close.
Yeah, I love seeing the Bears on here. I can just tell you right now from vibes alone, man, the Bears are probably my favorite team on the slate.
Who would have thought?
I know. It's a weird world, but 4-point home favorites against the lowly Cardinals. Both of those teams are basically battling to get top picks, and it's just a weird matchup. But the most popular game to me, you're going to talk about Dallas and Miami, and rightfully so. I'm just going to bring up Detroit and Minnesota. I think it's a great underrated game in the early window. Detroit is a 3-point road favorite, so we get a dome game. It's at 47. Detroit is 5th in points per game, 2nd in plays per game, and then Detroit in dome games this year, that includes their home games and games on the road that were in a dome, they're averaging 56 combined points. Minnesota's pass rate at home is 67%. And if you throw out their really gross games where they lost somehow to the Bears 10-12 and they won 3-0, like I don't know what happened in those games. If you throw those out, they're averaging 69 plays per game at home. So I think this is a great spot for both teams, and there's value options I think that you can also get to. So Detroit, Minnesota is definitely, it's not as high as Dallas and Miami, but I like it a lot.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like that game quite a bit. I can already see myself playing a little Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, skinny for sure. I'm just gonna say the obvious one: Dallas and Miami. It looks like the game of the week. This is in the late window. We have 51.5 overall total, as Kyle said. Both of these teams are top 3 on the slate in team total, so like it's kind of all there. And I think we get Tyreek back this week, so you get that plus the Cowboys coming off their worst game since their bye week. They could bounce back. We'll see. But obviously, there's tons of high ceiling plays in this game, so I think that one is going to be quite popular for obvious reasons.
Before we get to our sneakiest game, let's take a quick break. All right, sneaky sneak. Which game this week, Betz, are you looking at and saying, hey, this might go under the radar?
Yeah, I'm going to throw out the Jacksonville and Tampa Bay game. Now, there's a lot of moving parts with Jacksonville, namely Trevor Lawrence in concussion protocol. So we'll see on him. I don't know that I would go a full game stack if it's CJ Beathard. I mean, I just don't necessarily trust that. However, the target tree is going to be ultra condensed because Christian Kirk obviously is still out. Zay Jones just picked up a hamstring injury on Sunday night this past week. So it's going to be, I think, a ton of Ridley, Evan Ingram, and you can throw in Parker Washington probably in those kind of wide receiver sets. And you're taking on a Tampa Bay pass funnel where you can throw the football. So I want to have Lawrence in there. We'll see. And then on Tampa Bay, apparently they have 2 options now, Kyle, because Chris Godwin did nothing for, 12 weeks in a row, 13 weeks in a row. And then all of a sudden came out for 150 last week, something crazy. So you have some options on Tampa taking on a Jacksonville defense that forces you to throw the football as well. Baker, credit where credit is due, has played very well this year. And the Jags are still dealing with injury. They had Tyson Campbell still out, their top corner this past week, and their starting safety, Andre Sisco, was out last week as well. So if those guys are out again, really strong matchup for guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin.
Yeah, Baker profile is pretty great. We'll talk about him later if you want to play him in cash. I get it. You know he has more top 12 performances this year than Dak?
Really?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those where you have to go to top 12 to kind of fudge the numbers, but still, Dak has had 5 monster games. And then when you start sorting through it, you go, okay, there's been some soft spots. And obviously Dak was really bad at the beginning of the year. The team wasn't great, but he has one more than Dak. Let's throw Indianapolis and Atlanta. This was a game I actually circled at the beginning of the year, and I thought about, hey, I'm going to go to this game. Anthony Richardson, he's on my dynasty squad. It's my Falcons. They're probably going to wrap up the division by then. No, it's Gardner Minshew versus Taylor Heineke, who was just named the starter. So probably not where I'm going to spend my hard-earned money and go on Christmas Eve and be away from my family. So there are a lot of value options. Indianapolis has a ton of injuries, and we have to get a lot of updates. We'll talk about that later. Running backs, wide receiver Michael Pittman in concussion protocol. But Atlanta's been much better at home this year. 68 plays per game. That's 4th most in the league. 35 pass attempts per game. And maybe the best part, they won't be starting Desmond Ridder. So things could look up. And we know Colts games are the one thing that have constantly hit the over. It's one of the few teams that we've seen that. So I think that it has some sneaky appeal. I don't think I'm going to fully game stack, but we've seen cheap quarterbacks like Gardner and Taylor Heineke. If they hit 20 plus points at their price points and you hit the right stacking options, you can pay up elsewhere on the slate. So I think it's a sneaky dome game. Which game do you want to be underweight on?
I'm going to throw out Washington and the Jets. So as of now, we don't know what's going on with the Jets quarterback. With Zach Wilson in concussion protocol, I don't know that it matters. I mean, obviously this offense has struggled a ton. I think this is a spot where Garrett Wilson can obviously win against the Washington secondary, but I don't think you're getting into a full game stack here, just given the state of the Jets. And then on the Washington side, I mean, Sam Howell was benched last week. That was brutal. And now you're taking on a Jets secondary at home that obviously is one of the best in football. So no thank you on Sam Howell versus Zach Wilson and or whoever the backup is.
Yeah, when we previewed that game last week, we said, hey, there is a scenario where Howell stinks and the team stinks, but it was Howell kind of underperforming, and then your boy Terry finally came through. I just want to give you a little props that you stuck with him through the muck and the mire. Like, any love you want to give to Terry real quick?
I mean,
he's listening.
This guy, incredible, Kyle. Incredible season. Really helped all the best ball teams and redraft leagues and dynasty leagues that just missed the playoffs. But in that consolation bracket, Terry, you carried me through, brother. So I appreciate it. No, I thought it was a very good play in DFS, like we talked about. Just, we need to remember, like, variance is so high in the NFL. So when something is so bad the week before or so amazing the week before, it's probably not going to be the same way the week after, right? And coming out of their bye week, we just said, don't you think they get Terry involved? And he was just peppered with targets. I did play him in 2 tournament lineups. One of them was a Stafford team that did very well. One of them was a Sam Howell team that did not do very well. Obviously, Sam Howell getting benched didn't help, but shout out to Terry. Still love him.
I think that Green Bay Carolina is a game that you want to stay away from. I just can't imagine playing a Panther in any format. I mean, Chuba is kind of an interesting dart throw, but even stacking the Packers side, you might say like, oh, well, they could just beat up. Like Carolina, not only did they beat the Falcons, but they beat them the way that you would probably think. Control the clock, slow the game down, increase the variance, and don't score a touchdown. That's what they did this past week. So since their week 7 bye, Carolina's hit their team implied total just once. They're averaging 11.8 points per game. But here's my bigger point. This shocked me. Do you know that Carolina is 4th in the NFL in plays per game, and they've never played an overtime game? And they're 4th in time of possession. Like, that shouldn't happen. Usually good teams have a lot of plays because they hold on to the ball and they have a huge time possession. Why is this team like this way? They play so slow, and they basically, their defense has given it up where there was points where they just had to keep churning out long drives that turn into field goals. So they're a gross team. They're an embarrassment, and it's even more embarrassing they beat my Falcons.
I was going to say, I don't know what's worse. But yeah, man, I'm with you. And the other thing is, remember, last week, it was Jaden Reed week. Everyone played him. But if we get Christian Watson back this week, that changes things. Obviously, different scenario too with the pricing coming up on those guys. So we'll see. And Jaden Reed obviously picked up a toe injury on top of that. So I don't think it's as clean of a spot as it was last week.
Which team are you most confident hits the over of their team implied total?
Dude, Baker's going to take us to the promised land, okay? Over 20.5 points for Tampa is the play for me this week. This team has quietly scored 20-plus points in 6 of their last 7 games. The Jacksonville defense is struggling a ton in recent weeks. They've allowed 21-plus points, so this number right here is key at 21. They've allowed that to 5 of their last 6 opponents since their bye week. In that sample, they're 27th in EPA per play, and they are 27th in scoring defensively.
Dude, that's probably on the board, I think, the best play early in the week. And I'm shocked that this line is still -1, or Jacksonville -1. So
that's the last I saw, yeah.
Yeah, can you explain that to me? Like, with Lawrence, is he in concussion protocol, or is he...
He's in concussion protocol. So they probably would have made the spread, they're probably accounting for that in the spread, obviously. So I think that they would make the line probably closer to Jacksonville -3 or -4 if we knew Lawrence was going to play. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, over their team implied total makes sense. I mean, Tampa Bay money line right now makes a lot of sense to me too. At home, that was a confusing line. So I like that one a lot. We'll be talking about Tampa Bay pieces. I'm going to throw out the Falcons again. I mentioned the home games. They've surpassed their team implied total their last 3 home games against fair teams. I mean, teams that are playoff teams: Minnesota, New Orleans, Tampa Bay. Indianapolis, 71% of their games have hit the over. That's number 1 in the NFL. And if you look at only Indianapolis games inside a dome, they're averaging 53 combined points. I know Taylor Heineke is not somebody that I'm trying to give you confidence in, but I think Falcons pieces this week, after what they did last week, I think they're in a clean bounce back spot. Nobody wants to play Bijan. I get it. But in DFS, we remove that kind of stuff and just move on. So there's some Falcons pieces I think that can hit their team implied total of 20. Which team are you most confident hitting the under?
I'm going to go against a team that just scored 63 points, which is wild to say. But, the Raiders come off a game on Thursday where the Chargers just mail it in. They put up two defensive touchdowns and just completely embarrass them in an island game. Now they travel on the road at Arrowhead. Very different conversation. And we need to remember, this is kind of what I said just a minute or two ago, like things in the NFL are never as good or as bad as they might seem. It wasn't that long ago people were asking Aiden O'Connell at the podium, are you the guy for the job? 4 days later, after scoring 0 points, the team goes out and scores 63. They're going to bounce back, I think, in the wrong direction. I'm going to take under 16.5 on the road against a Chiefs defense that, yes, they've struggled a little bit more kind of in the last month, but on the season, they've been very strong. Even including that game against the Chargers, Aiden O'Connell, among quarterbacks that have 175 snaps, there's 28 quarterbacks that have done that since he took over as the starter. He's 25th in EPA. He's 28th in completion rate over expected. So tough spot on the road for this team. Give me under 16.5.
I'll take Washington under 17.5. They haven't hit their team implied total since week 10. Sam Howell looked really bad, and they go on the road to face the Jets, who are top 10 in points allowed at home this year. I mean, Washington right now holds the 4th overall pick. I think it's just a terrible spot. They've lost 5 in a row. They're reeling. It's not a team that you want to invest in at all this week for me. All right, let's talk about this week's salary standouts.
Salary standouts.
At quarterback this week, I think there's some good value options. We've mentioned that it's a limited pool. So, if you're looking at who the expensive guys are, it's Dak and Tua, and rightfully so. It's the game of the week. They're priced that way. We've also seen them just fall flat. And I want to mention this. We'll talk about the stacking later, but it's once again, it's expensive. If you're stacking Dak with 2 options or Tua with 2 options, it's really, really expensive. So that game has to go off. And that was one of the things we poked holes in last week. If you were stacking up Bills and Cowboys, it's like, hey, this trio that you're trying to stack with needs to put up 70 points combined. So their price tags feel right. But in cash, I think they're not really our guys early in the week. So we both like Justin Fields at 7.1 against the Cardinals.
Yeah, not much to say, man. I mean, the Cardinals just give it up to everyone. And I think the Bears, like you mentioned, just the market, the way that they view them. I mean, their team total is right behind the Cowboys this week, right? Which is not something you normally would say about the Bears. So the market is clearly on it. Obviously, the defense is struggling for Arizona. And we've seen some huge games from Fields in fantasy where he's not only pretty good as a thrower, but also obviously a candidate to run for, 60, 70 yards in a game. So Justin Fields looks very strong this week, taking on the Cardinals.
Yeah, and if you want to drop down a little further, Jared Goff at 6,900 is somebody I don't think I would play in cash, but if you look at dome games, we mentioned earlier, Lions dome games this year, 56 combined points. It's a game we like. Minnesota is tied with Arizona for the highest completion rate allowed. I like Jared Goff a lot, 6.9, but probably more for tournaments. And Baker is the cheaper option at 6K, but not as cheap as he used to be. Like when we used to get Baker for 5,300, 5,500. He's on the radar if you need to make it work. And then I just need to mention it. There's some cheap guys this week if you wanted to play Joe Flacco or Taylor Heineke this week at 4.8. I don't think I could spend my money there. I think if you wanted to have a large field tournament and kind of did what we did 2 weeks ago with Ritter, that's fine, but I think Fields and Baker are my top 2 in cash.
Yeah, certainly Fields for me. I mean, Joe Flacco, dude. The NFL is just flipping on its head this year. I mean, 44, 45, 44 attempts in 3 games for Joe Flacco since coming off the couch. They posted a 74% neutral pass rate with Joe Flacco under center last week. That was number 1 in the NFL for the Browns. So if you wanted to play him in cash, I do not think it's crazy because he is so cheap. It's a little uneasy when you have Justin Fields who could just break the slate, but I totally get it. He stands out. And look, man, Amari's cheap enough and Njoku's cheap enough that you could double stack him in a tournament if you want. So I just want to throw it out. I think Flacco is very interesting against the Texans this week.
Yeah, I feel like his story is one of my current favorites in the league.
It's pretty great. Like he's going to be playing a playoff game.
I know. It's like he got off the couch. I mean, it feels like it's like a Disney movie waiting to happen, except it's Joe Flacco, and we've seen him before, and we've seen him get on a hot streak. When Joey's hot, man, get out of the way.
Watch out.
let's talk about running back, because we joked earlier that Rachaad White is the RB1 on the slate, but maybe it's just because he's been so safe. He scored 15.9 DK points in 9 straight games. Like 15.9 or higher. That is wild. That's a crazy high floor for only 7,400. It'd be different if he was in the 8K range, but 7,400, he's rightfully priced on a slate that has no other running back. So him and Mostert are the 2 most expensive ones. And Mostert, the 20 total touchdowns you can't argue with. The matchup with Dallas might scare you away, but if you wanted to play Mostert and White and just say, hey, I think they have the highest floors on this slate, you can play them. I like Aaron Jones as a value option this week, 6.4 against Carolina. He came back, and when A.J. Dillon was out, 17 opportunities. Carolina's dead last in EPA per rush attempt. So he feels like a good value option. I wonder if he'll get fewer opportunities if Dillon returns from his thumb injury, but those are my early standouts.
Yeah, one thing too on Jones, I talked about this on the Injury Blitz show. With the Packers and their skill guys, they usually are very conservative in their first game back. He only played 48% of the snaps last week, so I think you're going to see somewhere in the range of 60-ish, even if Dillon's back. So I think that's a decent projection if you wanted to say that he gets more work, even in a better matchup. So I like Aaron Jones too. We're still kind of waiting on the Indy news with Zach Moss, and we can talk about it now too with Michael Pittman. Pittman's in concussion protocol. Zach Moss is dealing with they reported a shoulder injury, but at the time it looked like a wrist injury, so I'm still trying to figure that out. But regardless, we don't know who's playing running back. Is it Trey Sermon season, Kyle, in the week of week 16 in the NFL? Unreal, man, that we potentially could be playing Trey Sermon at 4,800. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just saying it is an idea this week if he is the dude. We'll wait and see what opens up for Indy this week.
Yeah, Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson will be the names. Goodson, he outtouched Sermon this is from John Daigle. Goodson outtouched Sermon 8-2 until the Colts took a lead, and then Sermon outcarried him 15-5 from that point forward. So their usage is kind of hard to figure out who's the guy, who's not. They're cheap, 4,800 for Sermon, 4,700 for Goodson. Atlanta is third in EPA per rush attempt, so it's not the best matchup on the road, but they at least need to be in the pool because they're the cheap guys this week. And then Ty Chandler at 5.6. Do we know anything about Madison? Because Ty Chandler looked awesome, 81% of the snaps this past week. He's got the juice, 26 touches. Kevin O'Connell said that he wants to feature him, not say he's the featured guy, but definitely comments that showed, hey, this guy's good. We like him. Anything about Madison we know right now?
So he didn't practice at all last week and then obviously didn't play. And the latest I saw was that they're hopeful he can practice this week. So, I mean, even if Madison is in, I think Tyler Chandler should make your tournament pool, because if Madison's active, it makes you a little uneasy about the cash game viability of Ty Chandler. But man, if you're a rational coach and you watch what just happened on the field, how do you give Alexander Madison more than 8 touches a game at this point? I mean, every time Alexander Madison touches the ball, usually not great things happen for that offense. Ty Chandler looks awesome, dude, and he's their best back right now. So the team's fighting for a playoff spot. It makes a ton of sense to me that they would use their best players, but we would think that about the Atlanta Falcons too, and they don't do that. So what do I know? But I'd say right now he looks doubtful. So we'll wait and see as the week goes on.
Yeah, speaking of the Falcons, we mentioned this on the main show the other day, but the Falcons' big 3 of their first rounders touched the ball on only 25% of their offensive plays.
Very cool. Very cool.
It's a really cool thing to track each week, but let's just talk about Bijan. 6,300 at home against the Colts.
Yeah, he's a tournament play. I think. But I just get shook, man, in cash. The last time I was willing to trust Mr. Arthur Smith, he pulled the rug out and I was like an idiot in cash games. So I don't know, dude. It's just one of those things that I don't think I can go there. But last time people gave him so many questions about usage and players and whatever, he fed Bijan the rock over and over again. So you would think that that's what they do. I think he's a really good tournament play if the roster percentage does not follow.
At wide receiver, Tyreek Hill is the most expensive player on the slate. We still need to figure out his status, but at 9,600, you might say, hey, that's really expensive. Dallas plays a lot of man coverage. His yards per route run, which anytime I give a Tyreek stat, I feel like it's supposed to like give shock and awe, but I think at this point we're just like, whatever. Like, that just makes sense with Tyreek. Betz, his yards per route run against man coverage this year is only 4.77.
That's unreal to even like try to wrap your head around that.
That's a video game number. And so they play a lot of man coverage. They might switch up how they play him, but Tyreek needs to be in consideration if he's healthy. And think about that. CeeDee Lamb at 9,200. We talked about the touchdowns. Miami, they have the big corners that we all know their names, but they still rank 25th in scheduled adjusted fantasy points. Those are the two expensive guys in the 9K range that in tournaments you're going to talk about. I think you can still play them in cash, but you have two guys in the 8K range that feel like they're just as good and they're $1,000 cheaper.
Yeah, I think these guys are both awesome this week. It's Amon-Ra at 8,200, and then in the same game, Justin Jefferson at 8,100. Last week, Justin Jefferson was dealing with that chest injury. Totally recovered from that at this point now, moving forward, completely over the hamstring. Like, this spot against the Lions at home is so clean. So for me, I mean, I'm never going to say anything bad about Tyreek Hill, but you're saving $1,500-ish to drop down. That seems, to get Justin Jefferson, that seems like the play that I would prefer to do in cash. We'll see what projections say.
Do you think that people will stack DJ Moore with Justin Fields in cash? Because obviously the Cardinals are a great matchup. 40% of their pass attempts result in a first down or a touchdown. It's the highest in the league. And DJ Moore, in the last 5 Justin Fields healthy games, 30.1 DraftKings points, 52 DraftKings points, 22.6, 25.4, 26.8. And then last week, it was a letdown at 9.2. Do you feel like that stack is still undervalued? Because you're paying $7,100 and $6,900. So what is that? $14,000. That's pretty cheap for a stack.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because if you want to play, one of Amon-Ra and Justin Jefferson, and we'll see on Tyreek, but people might try to play him. Obviously, if he's healthy, then you obviously can't fit DJ Moore. So I think it's going to be a pricing thing that he could get lost in the shuffle this week a little bit when you think about the optimal cash teams. But, the thing that I struggle with too is like sometimes the roster percentage projections don't account for the fact that when you have a quote unquote cash game quarterback that people play in tournaments, their pass catchers come up a little bit in roster percentage too. So we'll see where he settles, but I could see him getting kind of lost a little bit this week, given that he probably won't fit the optimal cash builds.
Josh Downs is probably somebody that profiles as a cash play if Michael Pittman's out. He's 5.5 at Atlanta. I hate playing Josh Downs, but you want a narrative? He's from the Atlanta area. North Gwinnett High School, shout out.
All right, so we got a homecoming game.
Yeah. If there's somebody from North Gwinnett, just DM me and let me know. I used to play baseball for them growing up, so shout out Josh Downs. I think he's fine. I don't think he's great. I wish he was in the 4K range. Yeah,
he does feel a little pricey, but the opportunity would be massive. I think he'd be the first read on the RPO stuff, don't you think? If Pittman wasn't there?
Yeah. No, I definitely think that he's going to soak up 8+ targets. And when you start doing the math, you think, okay, at 5.5, he's too cheap if you're getting 8 to 10 targets in a game that we like. So that's interesting. Noah Brown is cheap, but I would be terrified to figure out Noah Brown each week. I mean, 8 for 82 and 1 last week after 2 goose eggs. It's CJ Stroud's back. It's against the Browns. Feels like a game he'll probably go off though. He's one of the hardest players to project.
It's crazy, dude. Whenever one of Nico Collins or Tank Dell has missed, the guy is like Randy Moss out there. Just unreal stat lines. Whenever anything, if one of those guys are in or whatever, he's just like running around doing his cardio. So who the heck knows, man? I don't think you can play him in cash, but in tournament, sure, why not?
Yeah, he's hard to figure out. I think the cheap options this week, if you're looking for punt names early in the week, JSN caught the touchdown on Monday night. He's 4,500. His targets per out run over the last month are better than Metcalf and Lockett, but it's basically a 3-way tie. Those three wide receivers have similar usage in terms of targets, so that's tough. I think people will want to find the cheap Jaguars wide receiver if Zay Jones misses, and this is a tough situation for you because we have Parker Washington, who's your Penn State boy. He's a rookie, 3,800. And then we have Jamal Agnew, who has been probably your favorite player in the league for years.
The GOAT. I think it'd be Parker Washington. He'd be the one that I think would play almost an every down role, especially as the slot wide receiver. So I think he'd be the play for me in cash. Agnew, I'll never say anything negative because he's so great at football, but he kind of has these like gadget roles. He's still returning the kicks. So I think it's Parker Washington.
Yeah, I was looking at the usage. I was trying to sort it out. Like Parker Washington has been the guy. He ran 26 routes this past week. Agnew ran only 8. And then just to do a deeper dive, some guy named Tim Jones ran 16 routes, and Elijah Cooks ran 12 routes. They were only targeted once combined, but they were actually, Tim Jones was kind of like the replacement. And I had never heard of Tim Jones. He is the, I guess, doppelganger clone of Zay Jones, cousin of Zay Jones. I don't know.
Who knows, man? I played him once on a Showdown Slate like 2 months ago, but it didn't work out. I'll just tell you that.
You guys aren't that close?
No, we're not that close.
Okay. He's like a guy like, oh yeah, I think you went to school with me. Maybe.
Hey,
one
Tim
time.
Jones from 5th grade math? Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah.
I remember Tim.
Tim Jones sounds like the most boring name in the world. Can I throw out another punt name if you just want to like poo-poo on it? Colts wide receiver DJ Montgomery is 3,300. Yeah, so he caught a touchdown last week. He actually dropped one too. He dropped one earlier in the game, and he had another big play. But coming into the week, he had a total of 3 career receptions. So not a lot to go off of, but if Pittman's out and we get I just want something that says DJ Montgomery is, going to get a bigger allotment of snaps. I think he's viable at 3,300 as a punt.
Yeah, he would be in the cash game pool only if Pittman's out, though.
Yeah. Tight end, we're missing some names, but we also have the boys here. Laporta, Hawkinson, McBride, Njoku, Turd Ferguson. Like, you can't, to me, I don't think punting the position is a go-to this week.
Well, the thing is, DraftKings has not let us punt all year, except for last week. You could play Chig or you could play Tucker Kraft, but the pricing is just tough. And, I think what used to be right was trying to just punt it off and save money, but that was when we could play guys that were actually getting 6, 7, 8 targets at 3K. Those days are kind of over. So again, like we're kind of playing up into the upper 4, low 5 range this week, which feels terrible. But Trey McBride is priced as the wide receiver 18. And I don't think Hollywood plays this week. So Trey McBride again looks awesome. I will throw out, I think Cade Otton, your boy that you usually talk about, is at least viable as a stacking partner in that game. Just the Jags, man, against tight ends, they really struggle. We saw Isaiah Likely go off for 70 yards and a touchdown. Njoku, 691 and 2 the week before. And then even Tanner Hudson the week prior, 4 for 35. If you were getting, 7, 8 points at that price in cash, you might be okay. So I think Cade Otton is at least viable if you did want to go all the way down.
Yeah, Laporte and Hawkinson are in the same game. So for tournament purposes, that's going to be super interesting. Former Iowa tight ends, revenge game for Hawkinson. That's interesting. Njoku is still too cheap. Like, I would prefer Njoku, and I was looking at Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's 6,400, Njoku's 5,300. And in these Joe Flacco games, he's just been targeted way more. Njoku's been awesome the last couple weeks. So I think he's on the radar. Yeah, I'm going to have a really hard time in cash because in order to make one of these tight ends work, if you're not punting a position, you have to punt at wide receiver at least one spot. And then you have to find a value option at running back. Like if it's a Ty Chandler or an Indy running back, like those are our options. So tight end is a tough decision point. Usually we don't care about it. We worry about the very end. I think it's going to be really tough this week to go there. At defense, the Bucs just are going to be the play. If it's CJ Beathard, then the Bucs at 2.6 is a misprice.
Yeah, they'd be the play. They're at home. Obviously, against CJ Beathard, you could talk yourself into a story where it goes very well for Tampa. Makes sense to me, given that the state of their pass catcher core is depleted as well. Also, throughout the Bears, they've been playing really well defensively. I played them in some tournaments last week that worked out. Taking on Kyler and a Cardinals team that won't have Hollywood Brown, I don't think. And besides Trey McBride, they really don't have dudes in the passing game. So the Bears make a ton of sense to me as well.
I'll throw out the Jets too, 3.1 at home against sackmaster Sam Howell. They're just a solid play, high floor, 3.1 if you want to get different. But I do like the defense setup this week where you have 2 or 3 options around the 3K or below region that you can just go to. I feel like last week was so hard. You had to like pay up for a couple of defenses. I feel like it wasn't the easiest week if you wanted to do that in cash. So when we get to later this week, Betz and I will get to preview the games, talk through which guys we like in our cash constructions. It's early, but if you want to play with us, go to ballersdfs.com. Our DraftKings League, Fantasy Footballers DFS, Borg, and Betz. You can enter the contest, invite your friends, have a good time. Guys, it's week 16, and if you're in the same routine, same thing, like this is the week to sharpen your tool, to get better, to, talk it out. So I just want to recommend the Discord. If you want to talk out different things, our Fantasy Footballers Discord, our DFS, and our props channel, you can get in on that. Betz, tell the people goodbye.
Yes, sir. We will have a brand new take on the slate, I'm sure, when we talk Friday, but we'll catch you guys then. Enjoy the week. Lots of good football left with Thursday night, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And don't forget ChristmasFootball.com. We will see you on Friday.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.